Hi, this is Pat Yanez, your instructor in IM 312 International Trade. This is part 3 of a sequence of 3 brief video segments on supply chain. And this last segment now explores the impact of the container revolution on the Panama Canal. The canal is a very important transportation route for the United States because it allows the transportation of merchandise that arrives from Asia into the West Coast to be brought into the East Coast of the United States. And the canal was built in 1914, and at the time vessels were not very wide, so it wasn't built too wide. Right now, as vessels have become bigger and wider, the canal is becoming too narrow, and the maximum size of vessels that can accommodate are known as Panamax ships, and they can carry up to 7,500 containers. These vessels usually go through it, and they are so wide that there are only 3 inches on each side of the vessel between the walls of the canal. Because of the size and weight of these vessels, they have to turn off the engines, and locomotives then pull the vessel very slowly to avoid any accidents as it goes through the different parts. The canal is 48 miles long. With good weather, it takes about 8 to 15 hours to cross it from one ocean to the other one. It saves time and fuel by shortening almost 8,000 miles. It can accommodate about 15,000 vessels per year, and the average fee for crossing the canal is around $60,000. Since the Americans built the canal, they ran it between 1914 until the 90s. And then it was returned to the Panamanians in 1989. If you look at the canal from a satellite view, you're going to see something like this, and it shows that this is the narrowest part of Central America. So the location of the canal is very appropriate for this type of engineering project. A topographical view of the canal shows the fact that it's not flat land, and the canal needs locks so that by using gravitation force, vessels can be lifted or dropped to accommodate for the variations in topography of the terrains that the vessel is moving through. The French started the construction of the canal in 1881, but they could not complete it. So the Americans took over, and they completed the project in 1914. It was a major engineering feat, and at some point the American President Theodore Roosevelt visited the construction of the canal to emphasize the importance that this engineering project could have. It has very impressive locks in order to keep the water as the water level goes up and down. At any given point, there are dozens of ships waiting in line to enter the canal, and only one ship can enter at a time. So the locomotives make possible the safe transportation of vessels as they enter. And depending on weather and traffic congestions, there are times when vessels have to wait about 11 days to enter the canal. I have taken 2 ITM classes to cross the canal. The last time was in 2014, and it is quite an impressive trip to see how merchandise is moved from the west coast to the east coast and vice versa. Now that we have larger vessels, and they are known as post-Panamax because they can carry 18,000 containers, but they didn't fit in the original Panama Canal. So Panamanians have to make a decision about whether to stay as they were or widen the canal for these new vessels. They decided to widen the canal. So while they kept the original canal open, they created a new route for these larger vessels, and it was completed in 2016. So this allows now for more traffic and the passage of much larger containers, such as this one that can carry 18,000 containers. However, China has built an even larger one that can carry almost 20,000 containers. It's quite an impressive floating city, and it's larger than 4 football stadiums. Now, these new vessels that are wider and larger are creating environmental issues because they carry more containers, therefore they require larger ports, and more land is needed to storage so many containers. So this is becoming an urban challenge because these ports are demanding more and more space that comes at the expense of open spaces such as parks for the residents. Now, these post-Panama canals also require dredgings because they are deeper, and this has created some environmental challenges because there are many species that live at the bottom of these oceans or rivers, and therefore there have been many legal issues that needed to be solved. Now, another issue, another problem is that many of the local bridges were built at the time when vessels were not that high. So they do not accommodate post-Panama Canal vessels. One example is the Beyond Bridge, a local bridge here that joins Staten Island with New Jersey. And this bridge is important because vessels entering the New York port have to go through under the Verrazano Bridge, and then they have to go under the Beyond Bridge in order to reach Port of Newark. So the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey then had to decide what to do. Keep the post-Panama Canal, post-Panama ships out of New York or lift the bridge. And that required a major engineering challenge. So it was solved by building a parallel bridge temporarily so that the 5 million people that travel back and forth through this bridge to work and back home would not be interrupted for the years that would take to lift the Beyond Bridge. And these issues then for people in logistics, the canals are important because the width of the canal usually limits the size of the vessels. We have the technology to build larger vessels, but we have to keep in mind the limitation imposed by the width of the canal. Every 2 or 3 years, ITM travels to visit these ports to learn more about what are the latest technologies, the challenges, and they usually let us play with the equipment so that we get a sense of what it takes to manage these facilities. Now, as good as the technology is, accidents do happen. Could be technical accidents, human errors, and these are problems that need to be addressed. Accidents in port are more dangerous because they paralyze the port. Accidents on the sea are easier to handle because the captain then has to make an executive decision and drop containers in the water or abandon the ship. Lightning is very dangerous because these vessels are metal, and all of the containers are metal, so lightning is most likely to strike on them. And throughout the world, there are many containers floating in oceans. About close to 2,000 containers are lost overboard every year, and because of the construction don't sink, but they float just below the surface, which is very dangerous sometimes for smaller vessels. And then you have piracy issues, that happen, incidents. There are piracy incidents every day. You can check in this Piracy Today website what is the daily status of piracy dangers in the most in some areas of the world where piracy is very prevalent. Nicaragua has been talking about inviting Chinese investors to create a second canal further up north from the Panama Canal, and this looks very very questionable that it might happen, because look at the width of how much engineering work would have to be done in comparison to where the Panama Canal was built. But China is interested in this project as part of the One Belt, One Road initiative to secure more raw materials into China. It's an ongoing process, an ongoing project, and it's good to keep an eye on it. If you're interested in logistics and issues similar to the ones that we have dealt with in this segment, you should take probably one of the ITM elective courses like IN 320 or IN 341 that are taught by Professor Sonia Chapman. And as I have mentioned in previous videos, there are many ITM graduates that go on to get logistics jobs, because all brands, all companies need experts in logistics because of their transportation needs. This is the end of part 3 of brief videos on supply chain. Goodbye.